Now, although there are 23 presidential hopefuls, it is really a two-horse race. At just 40 years old, lawyer and pastor Nelson Chamisa is hoping to become Zimbabwe's youngest head of state. He replaced Morgan Tsvangirai as the main opposition leader in February, and he's determined to do what his MDC predecessor failed: wrestle power from ZANU-PF. The ruling party also has a new leader, Emmerson Mnangagwa. He's been president since November after longtime leader Robert Mugabe stepped down. CGTN's Farai Mwakutuya has more on the two politicians.
Both men claim to have more to offer than their mentors. The youthful Nelson Chamisa says he represents a real transformation and says it's time up for ZANU-PF.
Bye-bye, ZANU-PF, bye-bye.
Emmerson Mnangagwa has put politics at the back seat and the economy front and center.
Zimbabwe is open for business.
He's repeated that mantra at dozens of groundbreaking ceremonies and to a stream of foreign investment delegations. Billions of dollars have reportedly trickled in since he took over 7 months ago.
ZANU-PF has pledged to create a free economy market. You discover that there is much confidence that is being vested on the side of the establishment. And as a result, I strongly feel that where ZANU-PF is currently is where capital is. So I strongly feel that in terms of the economic clout, ZANU-PF might take the lead as it stands.
But critics say no real investment commitments will be made on the eve of an election.
We have heard of these mega deals for a long time. Even when Mugabe was still in office, we were promised heaven on earth.
Chamisa has been appealing to youths, who make up the majority of the estimated 5 million prospective voters.
The MDC alliance has got a huge following from the younger generations who've never worked. And they are saying, okay, maybe Nelson Chamisa is the person who can deliver jobs to them.
The ZANU-PF government recently opened an empowerment bank offering loans to unemployed youths. A pressing challenge that all citizens, regardless of age, want to see addressed is the cash crisis.
The solutions coming from either side are not very clear. The opposition is saying we will remove the bond and bring more US dollars. That doesn't resolve the fundamental issues. ZANU-PF is saying, okay, we'll begin to look at currency reforms and whether we can actually begin to look at our own currency. But that is not a short-term solution.
That means Zimbabweans will have to be patient with whoever prevails in what's proving a close race.
Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Well, over the weekend, former President Robert Mugabe weighed in on the elections. He's urged Zimbabweans to accept the outcome regardless of who wins. This is despite previously throwing his support behind those opposing his former party, ZANU-PF.
Congratulations to whosoever, whichsoever party wins the day. And let us accept that verdict.
Well, let's get to the latest on the voting in Zimbabwe. Let's start in Harare, where CGTN's Farai Mwakutuya is standing by. Farai, of course, we know that this is the first elections in Zimbabwe without Robert Mugabe since the country's independence. On the ground, how different does this election feel when compared to others?
Well, India, purely from a technical and logistical point of view, there are also some differences. This is the first time that Zimbabweans are voting using a biometrically generated voters roll. Also, polling center-based voting is being used for the very first time in this election. But I think when you talk about atmosphere and mood, this is a very different election. First time that we've had so many candidates contesting, whether as MPs, as presidents, or even as councillors, and that speaks to the freedom that we've seen since the resignation of former President Robert Mugabe. Parties have been free to campaign. The opposition has been able to access rural strongholds of the ruling party, which it couldn't do before. And, you know, when you speak to ordinary people, as I did today in the queues waiting to vote, they've said, look, they feel free. They feel that they've been unhindered, they haven't been intimidated, that they are going to make their choice freely without any hindrance. And I think that is the biggest difference, given what we've seen in the past, where tension, where intimidation, where anxiety characterized the build-up to elections. Lindy.
And that's a very key marker, isn't it? You say people feeling unhindered. What has that done as far as the voters' role is concerned, or at least voter turnout this morning, in terms of the numbers of people already lining up to cast their votes?
Well, Lindy, we've got about 5.5 million registered voters, people who've registered to vote, 5.5 million of them, and that is almost double the number we had registered to vote in the previous election. So that just shows the enthusiasm and the number of new voters, first-time voters that have been registered and recruited here. The turnout has certainly been significant. People have been, queuing up as early as 4 a.m. That's 3 hours before these polling stations opened. And when we spoke to them, people said, I wanted to come as early as possible because I'm determined to have my say. So clearly, there is interest. People are excited and want to participate in this election, and the numbers on the ground in terms of people turning up at polling stations have shown that.
Well, absolutely. Farai, we'll just ask you to stay on the line for us while we take a look right now at what's happening in Zimbabwe's second largest city, Bulawayo. We know, of course, it is an opposition stronghold. CGTN's Valdi Carlser has spent some time speaking to voters in that city. Let's have a listen.
Peters, a small community about an hour outside of Bulawayo. With over 400 registered voters, there are mixed feelings among young and old here ahead of Monday's vote. Street hawker Msongelwa Mpofu hasn't seen the inside of a voting booth in 38 years. He voted in 1980 during Zimbabwe's first democratic elections when Robert Mugabe took power. But he says these elections are different. He's voting for change.
Those ones you are tired of them, wanting new people, something like jobs first. And they can build that a school, or they can develop our roads.
Not everyone feels the same way, though. 25-year-old Raymond Chibera says Zimbabwe's youth have lost hope. He doubts the election will bring any real change.
Just was the last time when I voted in 2013. I was trying to make things to be changed, but those things didn't change. Even now I'm starving, there is no job. Some of the other youth in my area, they don't work. So even tomorrow I can vote, but because of these things which are happening on top, there's nothing which can change. So for me, I'm deciding whether I can go and vote or just live like that. Because if I can vote, there's nothing which can change.
The Electoral Commission says it expects the process to be without incident.
Bulawayo has never had any security concerns. All the years we have voted peacefully. People have voted peacefully, campaigned peacefully, and this year it was no exception. All the 428 polling stations are ready.
Many Zimbabweans spent their Sunday in churches ahead of the vote, preparing for the polls to open early in the morning. Valdi Carlser, CGTN, Bulawayo, Zimbabwe.
Well, we understand that voting is going ahead smoothly in Bulawayo so far. Electoral officials have not reported any problems or irregularities at the 428 polling stations in the city precinct. Now, around 250,000 people are registered to vote in Zimbabwe's second city. Many of them are positive and excited at the prospect of a new dawn.
I've worked as an agriculture teacher, as a meat inspector, as a farm manager, but right now I think I also want to own the land and be able to produce. That's the reason why I voted today.
That is full of services.
I want to build a new Zimbabwe that's full of services, that's full of things like nursing, teaching, merchandising.
We want a real change in Zimbabwe. We are tired of this old government. We want a real change. We absolutely want a real change. A president, we need somebody who leads us, not a ruler.
I was so excited. I'm still very excited. I hope things will change and we get a better living.
I voted today because it's our constitutional right to vote, and we can't complain after that if we haven't voted, so we've got to be part of voting.
Just glad that I'm here to see what happens, because I won't be here for too much longer. But one's got to make the effort.
Well, let's get you more now on today's voting in Zimbabwe. We have been speaking, of course, to Farai Mwakutuya in Harare, but live in Bulawayo. We're now also joined by CGTN's Valdi Carlsa. Valdi, let's start with you. Of course, we know there's high hopes, high expectations with regards to this election. Is that being reflected in the voter turnout in Bulawayo?
Absolutely, Lindy. I've spoken to a number of observers who says voter turnout here in Bulawayo is very high. As you said, 250,000 registered voters in around the city. And I thought, since we're nearing lunchtime, that some of these queues would start to peter out a little bit. That hasn't happened at all. We're out here at Stanley Hall. There's still a significant queue. A presidential hopeful and leader of one of the opposition parties here, NDCT, Thokozani Kupe, just cast her vote just a few short minutes ago. I'm actually watching her walk out off camera as we speak. She's saying that those people that say this presidential race is a two-horse contest are really mistaken, because she reminded people there are 23 candidates. She's one of them, and she's already assured of victory as well, saying her people will come out and vote for her. Bulawayo is her hometown. She did have a final rally here on Saturday, so she was one of the thousands who have turned out in the city this morning. And as I said, those queues are still as long as they were. We started off voting quite early at Bulawayo City Hall. In fact, we started 2 minutes ahead of schedule. At about 6:58, electoral officials started handing out those ballot papers, and that's just giving you an indication of the kind of excitement that is in the air here. People are really hoping for a change. I tried to speak to as many people as I could this morning and get diverse views, and diverse demographics, from old, from young, different suburbs within the city. And certainly there is this consensus that they're voting for change, they're hoping for change, that in this historic elections things will really be different.
Historic elections indeed. And as you said, Valdi, it's important to remember that there are 23 candidates. Zimbabweans have never been spoiled for choice in such a manner. But what do you think will dictate voters' choices in Bulawayo?
I think the reasons are pretty varied. As you heard, some people are voting to get access to land. Some people are voting to get basic services. One guy even said to me, if someone could just come to our area and build a school, provide better quality roads. There are a list of things, and some of these things are within local government capabilities. So I said, but listen, here in Bulawayo, certainly, the local council seats are taken up by MDC. So does that change then mean they might hand over power to ZANU-PF at a local government level? Certainly not. That's not the impression I'm getting here. I think what people are hoping for, that if a change at the top comes, that will then trickle down, and they'll see this economy moving, they'll have access to jobs. I think jobs must be one of the things that I've heard repeated over and over and over again, and that's among young people, that's among old people, watching their children struggling for jobs. I think that once they get this economy moving, there will be a real sense that Zimbabwe is getting back on its feet, that the cash crunch they're currently living through might be able to be resolved. But certainly there are thousands of people, young people, old people, middle-aged people, that are hoping that what they will see is some sort of significant change following these polls, and it won't just be the normal status quo. I'm sorry, people are just moving off camera. I'm just having a look to see what's happening there, Lindy. Nothing significant going on. These queues that we've seen have progressed pretty smoothly. On average, it takes about 7 minutes. We can't forget that even though this is a presidential election, people are also voting for the members of parliament. They're also voting for their local councillors, that's local government representatives. So it really is what Zimbabweans call a harmonized election, and that's been the case for about 10 years. They vote for all tiers and spheres of government, all in one go. And while the focus might be on the presidential elections, it's often at local government level where those services get delivered to people and where they interact with their local government officials, Lindy.
Absolutely, and it's where sometimes you see the most change indeed. But of course, this journey for change begins at the ballot box. Let's go back to you, Farai, in Harare. Can you give us an indication of how soon perhaps we can expect to see some results trickling in?
Well, Lindy, the process here is that once those polling stations close, they open at 7 a.m. and will close at 7 p.m. Once that is done, vote counting will begin immediately at each individual polling station. Once those results have been verified and approved by the different polling officers and representatives of political parties, they will then be displayed at each polling station and then also submitted and transmitted on to the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission Command Center. The Zimbabwe Electoral Commission is the only body or institution that is mandated constitutionally to announce final results, and they say that they will need to verify and tally those results but give a final result or outcome of this election within 5 days. However, because these results are being posted at polling stations, we expect that once they have been posted, people will start to do their own tallies and we'll get an indication. So I'm sure either later tonight once counting is complete, or tomorrow morning when people wake up and start to see those results at individual polling stations, we'll be able to start to get an indication of who's got what, who's leading where, amongst others, Lindy.
Indeed, there'll be plenty anticipation, not only in Zimbabwe, but across the world. Thank you so much to Farai Mwakutuya joining us there in Harare. And of course, CGTN's Valdi Karasa was live with us there from Bulawayo.